Okay, we are live, and we appreciate for such a wonderful moment again that we may share in Science of Life, where actually we are looking at the issue of reclaiming our soil as we look into the issue of medical missionary work and creating our own soil biology. And so today we are going to deal with creating our own soil biology. We shall do some soil analysis and also making our own fertilizers. And before we just begin, I'd like us to bow down so that we may be able to pray and ask the Lord to guide us in this session. Shall we pray? Our Heavenly Father, we so thank you for another time that we have to learn. And we pray that you may impart on us the skills necessary for, Lord, working on our soil, and above all, Lord, how that we may get optimum health with these skills that you are going to give us, so that we may not only help ourselves, but help others who are coming into truth. We know that you are speaking to your people in this time. And as we even try to implement the Candle Living message, we pray that you may be with us and help us to know, give us the wisdom to understand what we are doing. In Christ Jesus' name I pray. Amen. And so welcome Brother Corey and Brother Zadok in this session. I hope that we are going to learn a few things as we do soil analysis, creating our own soil biology and fertilizers. Unfortunately, we didn't have a session last Sunday, but we have another chance of having a session today. We were looking the other time when we were having this session, we left it at, we were looking at cover cropping, and just to back up, the least expensive implement of getting your soil balanced native species, like using sorghum, millet, legumes, amaranth, yellow sunflower, tithonia, erosion preventer. We looked at it, that good to use cover crop for grazing in case you have cattle. So when you are choosing your crops for cover crops, it will be good to use the crops that the cattle can use for grazing, so that they may give you also manure for that case. And so welcome also Sister Florence to the session. We are just we have just prayed and we are beginning, and we left the other time at cover crop. And so today we are going to look, God willing, at these 5 things before, if time allows us, before we will go to number 7 in the next session, next Sunday. And so welcome, Brother Corey. I think number 1 we are dealing with is creating our own soil biology. This is something which is key for us if we will get whatever we need. You see, the problem has been that we want to prescribe the things that should be used on medical missionary, but what we are having on the market are the GMOs. And so when you prescribe, you find that in E.G.'s white days, these things were working, but in our days, they are not working. They are not giving us the optimum health, because the life force or the vitality in them is not as it's supposed to be. And so the main reason for reclaiming our soil is that we may have a soil that can produce crops that have a good life source and a good vitality, so that when even they are used as supplements or nutrients that should be used on the sick people, they should be things that can be able to help them. I don't know what you have prepared for now. The point number 1, creating our own soil biology.
Okay, there's just can you make sure that, I'm not sure if everybody's getting in or not. No, I think they are.
Yes.
It said something about in the meeting. Everybody that's trying to join is getting in.
And Brother Zadok, you can be helping us also if we are busy to approve the people who are coming in. Yes, continue.
Yeah, waiting room. I don't know what that. Yeah.
I think Study-1 is having a problem with her network. That is why
Okay, yeah, because it keeps saying
joining.
Right. Numerous Ardalan. I'm sure there's not that many of them out there. So yeah, Sammy, you want to do your screen share again with
there?
Yeah. We're gonna try to go over this quickly because I want to spend more time. I want to spend more time on the soil tests if we can touch it, especially on your soil test, but we can even talk about Sister Florence soil test to a degree too. But your soil test in particular is very detailed. It's as good as anything that I see that we have here in the United States. So it's just a really good soil test, and people I think will learn a lot from it. So on this creating our own soil biology, you actually have another dot right underneath that soil inoculant, Johnson Sioux bioreactor, Diego footer. That is, you can really put that soil inoculant as a subheading under creating your own soil biology, because it's that the Johnson Sioux bioreactor. It's actually very, very similar to the things that you've already built. You've been showing the pictures to everybody of these towers that you've put soil in and everything like that, and you're growing the plants out of them.
Yes.
That's very similar to a Johnson Sioux bioreactor. The only difference will be in the Johnson Sioux bioreactor, you're going to build the same kind of tower and you try to set up so there's airflow in the middle of it, just like you guys did. You put that tube in there, except for you wouldn't fill it with rocks in this case. You would eventually take the tube out, and so air can get in there because you're trying to keep airflow in there to create the biology. And you're not putting any native soil, maybe a little bit for biology purposes, but you're just putting organic matter in there. Things like wood chips, grasses, leaves, all of this type of stuff, and you're letting it just slowly break down and create biology in there. And in that, you're looking for, what you're trying to do is put as much diversity in that bioreactor as possible of different plants, whatever you have access to. You can even take some soil, a little bit of soil, and sprinkle it in there just to get the biology from that in there. Or you can put various inoculants in there, but we're really kind of creating our own inoculant with this by just getting as much diversity as you possibly can in your area. Hey, Joshua made it. Welcome.
Hey, good morning, everyone. How's everybody?
So yeah, pretty good. We're just going over a little bit of stuff so we can get everybody in before we want to spend most of the time on Sammy's soil test. And so we're just kind of touching on a little bit of the stuff last week, but you know, I don't know if right now with this, just that person's name, Diego Footer, that gives you can get some videos on YouTube that can go into more detail about the Johnson Sioux bioreactor and such, and making your own inoculants and various things like that. We don't have to go into a lot of detail when people can just go to YouTube and check out those videos to see the various different types of methods of making Johnson Sioux bioreactors and what you're trying to accomplish there. So unless there's any particular questions, or if Joshua wants to add anything on creating our own soil biology, this is especially in the case when we might not have access to good inoculant products that we could potentially purchase. So
Yeah,
anybody has anything else?
I mean, I think you're onto something there with the, the Johnson Sioux. I know John talks about that a fair amount. I've been reading this week the Rodale Book of Composting, and as well as how to start your own worm bin. And I think it's kind of on bacteria. Build it and they will come. If you have the food source right, then the bacteria will just show up. That's God's promise. So, this might be a good way to start, browns and, greens and browns, and getting your carbon nitrogen ratio right and building your own compost, maybe the best way to get biology going. And also, like we talked about before, if there are farms that have good soil, if there's some native land that hasn't been farmed, I would be spending some time in those areas and looking at the soil and smelling the soil. And you'll smell that good earthy smell. Make you a batch of compost tea and see what you got, and just test. Always save a little bit of the mother. You find something you like, hold on to that, and you can keep that in the fridge or wherever, and then you can just start it on your next batch.
So yeah, you may want to add in there, Sammy. Some people might be interested in making a worm bin. Because worms are going to add worm bins, and the product that they produce is going to add more diversity of biology and stuff than just a straight compost pile will.
Yeah, worms are a fertilizer factory. That's the ultimate goal of regenerative agriculture, is that you could take a shovel full of soil and have 25 earthworms per shovelful. That's the ultimate goal. And Graham Sate says that at that point, you'll be creating $60,000 of free fertilizer every year. The worms can take that soil and digest it through their, perfect body type that the Lord's given them, and turn that into usable forms for the bacteria. And then the whole process of biology starts. So I noticed that we want more fungal dominant than bacterial dominant, but the way to get fungal is to get bacteria. So we feed bacteria, get bacteria. That should cause the fungal populations to show up. Certainly inoculating with fungal is good, upon planting. You should be able to get access to a, good inoculant in that regard. But definitely, as we feed bacteria, we'll get fungal. Your pHs are a bit low. We're going to go into that. And, as we get those pHs raising, the fungal will show up as well. So anyway, that's all I got. Go back to you, buddy. Keep going. You're doing a great job.
That's good. That's good. So yeah, Sammy, I think we can, the highly dominated fungal soil, that those Johnson Sioux bioreactors, you're going to get, whenever you have a slow breakdown compost pile like that, that is going to tend towards a fungally dominated compost, where if you're constantly turning it, you're going to have a more bacterial dominated compost. That's why I think a lot of people like the Johnson Sioux. It just is a slow, usually a process of a year or potentially more, and allowing that fungus to the various fungal species to take over in that particular and produce that. And then you can ultimately, like Joshua said, make compost tea or extracts out of that and inoculate your soil with that. And that's the primary. You can use the compost as an added fertilizer, but you're seeing more and more people using just small amounts, and they're basically using it as inoculants. And into the large acres and acres with just a little bit of material, they can turn it into an inoculant. So, and as a matter of fact, it's what Joshua brought up about the 25 earthworms per shovelful. I mean, right there, now when you have that, you have automatic natural tillage at that point.
Yeah.
When you've got that much earthworm activity going on, your soil is constantly being tilled and rotated with that. Now, when we're, the issue of, as a matter of fact, let's actually not even go into the tillage right now. In those particular areas, Sammy, let's go ahead and save those and let's move. If you can share unless anybody else has any questions or anything on that particular point, because about creating our own biology, our own soil inoculants, we can move into your soil test.
So is there any question maybe to the people who are listening? If you have something to say.
So yeah, Sam, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, get your soil test out and share that so everybody can see your soil analysis. And we can touch on Sister Florence's too. It's a little bit, it takes, you have to do a little bit more.
Do we start with Sister Florence soil, please?
You want to start with hers?
Yeah, I wish we start with hers, then maybe we can dwell on the other one.
Hold on one second. I'm going to go up because I wrote down, because I had to study and learn how to translate her soil test into something that I would even understand. So I wrote it down. So hold on.
Okay.
Reverse. Yeah. You had, so Sammy, do you have her soil test? Then?
Yes.
There it is.
I don't know. Can you see it better?
Yeah, I can see it. That's good.
Okay. This
So, yeah,
is
you
her
can scroll
soil. And this is what you are looking at.
Yeah, well, go all the way down. Keep going down. So we get right to right here. Right here. Now, there was a lot of information on here. For me, I'm not used to seeing things put in this particular way. As you can see, the units, like where it says unit, grams per kilogram, mmol per kilogram, and stuff like that. Your soil test, Sammy, doesn't read that way. It's put in different units. So I had to look up online, how do I convert this over to something that my brain can understand?
Yeah.
And some of it I didn't, like organic carbon, grams per kilogram. I'm used to, like in your soil analysis, you were given organic matter percentage, which was, I think if I remember right, on yours was like over 4%. I don't know what 22.3 grams per kilogram translates to carbon on her soil test. I really don't know. I don't know if Joshua knows how that translates into understanding like an organic, because we're used to understanding things based on an organic matter percentage. And the soil, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%. So I don't really, my brain doesn't know what, other than I see their range and it's inside that range, but I don't know ultimately what that really means to me. Do you understand that, Joshua, at all? Grams per kilogram on organic carbon, and is organic carbon the same thing as organic matter in this particular case?
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, our soil tests over here in the United States don't read like that. So so yeah, we can, it looks like at least it's within that particular range, but I don't know. We'll concentrate more on that when we get into yours, Sammy. Because yours gives values that we understand. But we can go down to I don't know. Typically I don't say much on nitrogen because nitrogen is so, it fluctuates so much. A lot of like, I know like Logan Labs, they don't even test directly for nitrogen in the soil tests I get here. So I don't know if you want to mention anything about what you see there with nitrogen, Joshua, or if it's more important just to get into kind of discussion about some of these other.
The only thing I can gather, and I'm with you, I just need to change those conversions.
Right, and I'm going to when we get down here to phosphorus. I've already got it all written down, so I'm gonna I'll explain to everybody what the parts per million, because obviously you understand parts per million.
But you can obviously see that she at 86.9% calcium and only 3.5%, you got more potassium than magnesium. So your limiting factor at this point is magnesium.
That's not percent. That we'll get into that in a second. She has we'll get into, let's just go to phosphorus first.
Yeah,
grams per kilogram. Grams per kilogram of phosphorus. The conversion on that is, if you guys look down there and see zinc and copper,
yeah,
you'll see this on Sammy's test too on some of the stuff. Milligrams per kilogram. The conversion over to parts per million is a 1-to-1 ratio. So that's easy. So when you see 3.5 milligrams per kilogram of zinc, that's the same as 3.5 parts per million. So that's easy for us, me and Joshua, to understand. Copper, same thing. So grams, that's 1,000 milligrams. And we see that there's 0.3. So that's 300 milligrams of phosphorus per kilogram, or 300 parts per million of phosphorus. Now, I don't know, what I don't know is if this soil test is using a Melic 3 or what it's using. So I don't know. I can't say a lot on the details. I just, this particular soil test is not, I don't know, it's not as efficient as Sammy's, but typically you would think of 300 parts per million of phosphorus as being quite high.
Yes. Yeah, that's like us. That's Florida soil.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, mine is like 150 parts per million. But we'll see on Sammy's soil test, his phosphorus was like 4 parts per million.
Yeah.
So extremely low.
Yeah.
And then the potassium, so you see, okay, analysis result 4.4 mmol. I'm not going to go into all of the because you have to do, there's some math involved here, but what this breaks down to is, for potassium, is 172 parts per million is what that breaks down to.
On which one?
For potassium, which is pretty, that's probably going to, I'm assuming, based on, I don't know exactly what the cation exchange capacity in the soil is, but it looks like from the numbers down here at the bottom, I don't know how to convert that necessarily, but it looks like that's probably somewhat in range. According to this, it's actually a little bit high. At least the ranges that the soil test company gives. The potassium slightly high. But the big one I wanted to talk about here is the calcium, because this number, this is going to be high. 3,482 parts per million.
Wow.
Is what that comes out to be. Which I'm trying to understand. What's weird about, and I don't know that, I have to, maybe you guys will just have to do some research on her soil like that. I don't know. You would think of 3,428 parts per million of calcium that we're dealing with a fair amount of calcium carbonate and a high pH, but according to the soil analysis, the pH is low at 5.8. So I'm just wondering, it's like, okay, was there I don't know, where's all of this calcium coming from, yet the pH is 5.8? I'm not sure on that. Maybe there's some type of anomaly. That's one thing I've noted. I've done in studying some soil tests. It is possible to get like a chunk of calcium limestone in your soil sample, And that soil, when that soil sample gets tested, it will read really super high in calcium just because of one little fairly small chunk of limestone in there, and it kind of skews the soil test. So I don't know if that's what happened here in this particular case, but the calcium levels are extremely high. So it present, and you can look on the range here, 15 to 25, and she's all the way up to 86.9. So we're talking about like extremely excessive in calcium levels, yet the pH is 5.8. And it's like, typically you'd want to add lime to bring that pH up, but in this particular case, you really don't want to be adding that much more calcium. There may just be an anomaly, an error in this particular soil test. I don't know. I would just suggest getting the same soil test that Sammy had, unless maybe Sister has some thoughts for us.
Yeah, I just want to maybe state that, you know, at the point that we were doing this test, we had not even added any lime, but the recommendations that they gave to us was that we do lime. And after that, we actually did a lot of lime in the whole farm. And we saw the produce go up a little, but now I'm surprised that, you know, it was at 86.9 and very high. And as you're saying, then the pH also, you know, is not commensurate to that calcium, which is here. So I'm surprised. Maybe it was an error.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm sure Joshua's probably heard of soil tests where somebody got it, and then when they took their sample, they had a chunk of limestone in there, and that skewed the soil test. Have you've heard of that, Joshua?
Yes.
Happening. That's a possibility. I would just recommend in this particular case to get the same soil test that Sammy has and see what it comes out to be in there, because I mean, based off of that, I mean, I don't know, what would you do in a situation like that, Joshua, where it's showing that you see that the range they give for that should be between 15 and 25, and she's up at 87. They're saying to add lime because of the pH issue, but that much calcium seems like it's going to bind up a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I think, you know,
if that's true, if the soil
if
really
that's true, you know, your magnesium is also a double bond and it's really short. I guess you're about to go into that.
Yeah, the magnesium is at 85 parts per million. So yeah, we're way.
I can see adding magnesium, and then if you're gonna have a problem with available calcium, but I don't know that adding lime, you are getting magnesium with that lime, like 10%, but you're getting 30% calcium. And I don't know that you're gaining any ground there. It sounds like we need to really unlock this calcium. And to do that, we need to raise magnesium, and that should knock some of this calcium off the colloid. The other thing that this test is not showing is sulfur. And I just wonder what the sulfur content of the soil is. And if it's low, then could we just, you know, you know, you could use gypsum and get some available calcium, and it's not going to raise the pH or lower the pH. But if you need calcium because it's so tied up here, gypsum mag sulfate probably makes sense in this regard. Again, maybe a better soil test could be helpful. Or did you sign on to their website and get anything on, you know, as far as their parameters, or is there a website we could go to, Ms. Florence, to look at that or talk to?
No, we did not do that. And given that, okay, we don't understand this language much, so we just took their recommendations, and that's what we implemented. But it's interesting that you're also bringing up the issue of sulfur, because just recently we were having certain problems with the mangoes on the farm, and one of the experts told us that there is we need to do something about sulfur, to do some fertilizer that has, you know, sulfur and whatever. So I think, yeah, there could be a problem as well in that sulfur content.
But I think you're definitely gonna want a different soil test, because obviously at 5.8, if we just put elemental sulfur down, we're going to be driving that soil pH down. If that's true, we just need a more accurate soil test to know what's really going on here, because it's a situation of like, wait a second here. This soil test is saying we got extreme high calcium but low pH, and it's like, okay, something seems like there's an anomaly here, or there's some type of something going on. And I'm not sure. It's kind of baffling my mind.
Correct. I'm looking at something, and maybe it may be an error with the result or what. I'm reading something that when the pH is low but the calcium is high, then the soil has a problem with actually absorbing aluminium, iron, and boron.
Okay.
Did you get that?
Yeah, I got that. So with a lack of boron, you wouldn't have any calcium at all, and at the pH. So it's tied up because of the lack of you said aluminum, boron, and what was the other one?
Iron.
Yeah. Interesting. So if you understand that,
she can try another soil test.
Yeah, that's personally what I would do, is get the same soil test you had, because I really like how your soil tests come out. I can understand it very easily, and just make sure that there was no anomaly in that calcium. Although she says that she added lime after this test, not before it. So it'd be interesting to see, are the numbers even higher now? Yeah. And if they're not, and they're like more normal, then we know that there was definitely an anomaly in this particular test for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I think we'll go for another test.
I'm sorry?
I think we will need to go for another test.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sister Florence, maybe you can use the crop nuts. Was it crop nut? Yes, the crop nut soil analysis. You can use that and see how it comes out, so that we may try to look at it. Is it?
Right.
We'll link up with you. You let me know how to go about it.
Yes, because this is good. Let's go ahead and go over your crop analysis. I mean, your crop nuts one now, because this will be easily understandable to Joshua when he sees all this, because everything's in parts. If you go ahead and scroll down a little bit, everything's in parts per million. I mean, this, except for when you get down to cobalt and molybdenum, where it says milligrams per kilogram, that converts. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, so that converts to parts per million as well. So it's all, the whole thing is in parts per million, so that's easy to understand for us. Now, later on, Sammy, if we get into discussion about adding a various mineral or whatever, how do we know based off of parts per million? How would we know how much to add? We can get into that a whole nother time, in the conversion. In your guys' cases, I'm sure you guys are using kilograms, like how many kilograms per acre you would need. Over here we go by pounds per acre, but it's easily convertible from parts per million to understand how much you would need to add and stuff like that. But that's not really the critical point that we're going to go over right now. We're just letting you know that from this soil test, we can take and try to understand how much we would need to add per acre. And then if your area that you're actually going to be fertilizing or amending is smaller than an acre, you can convert that down, scale it. That's what I'd like. My plot out here was 5,000 square foot. I used a per acre to understand how much I need per acre, but then I just scaled it down to 5,000 square foot. So you can easily convert this stuff, scale it, depending on the size that you're dealing with. So, have you had a chance, Joshua, to peek at his soil test previous to this?
Pulling them back up right now. Yeah, I did look at them. I was actually I was pleasantly surprised. I think there's
Right.
some challenges there, but I don't know. I might trade you soils. You come farm in Florida, I'll come down there.
I was quite surprised with this too, with the exception that I'm highly worried about the cobalt.
Yes. There's several areas of concern for sure.
That's typical of any soil, though.
Yeah. I mean, guys, just be thankful for what the Lord's given you. And if we can, it's like every person, we feed me, Corey, Sammy, the same diet. One of us will get healthy. The other two will not get healthy. So we have to, this is a part of who we are. The soil is where we came from, and understanding the imbalances, not only in our soil's life, but in our life, will help us fix both. So understanding that this system that God gives us works to the soil level, to the plants, to the animals, to us, to the planet. So I think the Lord says, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And I'm so thankful that Corey's here bringing good knowledge and understanding of the farming system, or I call it the Eden system. And we're still learning. There's more that we don't know than we do know. So I challenge you guys, as you learn these things, challenge Corey on these things and say, hey, it doesn't look right for my soil or what I'm growing. And that'll help us, help you, grow. Corey, do you want to start, or do you want me to jump in there? What do you want to do?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, I can go through this, or you can go through this step by step, or if there's a certain spot you'd like to, I don't know what you have more experience with dealing with soil tests than
Yeah.
I'm just, I've learned from Graham, say, just as you did, but you have experience in going over them and explaining them to people and understanding this particular stuff. I can chip in where I can and stuff like that, but it might be best for you might have a certain spot you want to start off with. I don't know if you want to start off right at like CC or pH or where calcium. You can determine that where you want to start off with this.
Well, let me ask Sammy. Sammy, were you surprised at this soil, and what do you see here?
No, when you see, when Corey told me that I have a good soil, I was somehow surprised, because the issue is that I have been using this soil and trying wherever I can, but you find that when you plant, the leaves of the crops are so thin. And so I was wondering, really, I'm not that good in agriculture. I've just started learning this year about agriculture. I'm not good. I'm still a student, and I'll be still a student. I'm starting to learn. But that is what was worrying me, because I had been using organic manure and all this stuff, but every time you plant, the first one was good, as I told you, but the subsequent ones, you see that the leaves are so thin, and what is coming out is not good. My wife tried different vegetables. They really failed badly. She never tried again. And now we are again trying to see out things.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, right off the, as far as, I mean, everything that you have is either like right in the optimum range. Most of it, the vast majority of it, is in the optimum range or very, very close to the optimum range, or a few things like manganese and cobalt and molybdenum. Surprisingly, on the cobalt and the molybdenum are excessively high, but the molybdenum I don't think is as much of a worry, because the molybdenum is only going to be probably a toxic problem in a really high pH. It's one of those rare minerals that plants absorb easier in a high pH soil, but you don't have a high pH soil, so I don't think you're going to have a toxicity problem. Molybdenum, there's just the potential issue that we need to learn and study about with the cobalt. And I do want to ask, but before getting into the cobalt situation, I'm curious, Sammy, if you see a lot of yellowing in the leaves of various plants that you grow in this. A lot of times you might not think you would with that low pH, and you have such high numbers of the minor elements, and some people would think that you wouldn't see that yellowing, but the manganese to iron ratio is one that suggests to me that these plants in this soil are going to have difficulty getting iron. They're going to have difficulty. Phosphorus seems to be very, very low. I don't know, without seeing a total test, is the soil really that low in phosphorus, or is it just so bound up that the plants can't get it? What's going on there? Because the phosphorus number is exceptionally low, which is going to give you, your plants are going to lack energy to grow, to do much with,
Yeah,
with no
Ascore,
access to that phosphorus. But the manganese can definitely, that high of a manganese level can definitely make it difficult for the plants to get iron, even though it's a low pH situation, and you may be seeing a lot of chlorosis in the leaves, surprisingly, that some people would contribute, oh, there's no iron. It's like, no, there's plenty of iron. It's just there's a lot of manganese in this soil, a lot.
yeah, Corey, as maybe you were saying about the yellow flowers, the yellow leaves, actually. I have them, and I was to raise the concern as we continue that when you look at the vegetables, they have the yellow, the leaves are yellow. And there's something I was reading that the high manganese actually kills the life force in the crop, actually interferes with the phosphorus, which is the life force or the immune of the plant. And so that is something that I was reading as I got the report that high manganese actually interferes with the life force of the plant, which is phosphorus, and phosphorus is the one in charge of photosynthesis and all that stuff. And so I was to raise the problem that in other parts of the garden, I'm having leaves which are yellow.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Is there iron humate available anywhere in your country? I wonder. I think it comes from the waste plants. It's called iron humate.
I don't know. Maybe I check.
So I'll jump in right there, and it's interesting. I feel like this is almost the same as Miss Francis, where my tendency is we're very low on sulfur. That's where you're being able to get your complete protein synthesis. You have to have sulfur to convert your nitrogen. So if you're applying animal manure with the nitrogen with no sulfur, that's probably part of your issue. But if you add too much sulfur, your pH is already 5.8, and we don't want it a whole lot lower than that. So even though it says we have enough calcium at 1,640 parts per million, well, it actually is saying we're low based on this chart. I do think we need to add some calcium, and part of that calcium could come from lime.
Right.
Your magnesium is good, but maybe magnesium is fine. Maybe leave magnesium alone, and you do need some calcium here. So some high cal lime probably would make sense. And by getting more calcium, I agree with you. It's the manganese and some of these other very high micronutrients that's overshadowing your phosphorus. I'm with Corey. I bet you have phosphorus there, but it's very tied up and unavailable. But to get access to your calcium, you do have to have that energy, and right now you would be dead before you started with the lack of phosphorus. So I don't know if any soft rock phosphate, we don't usually recommend that you apply a lot of phosphorus, but in your regard, you may need some phosphorus, which manure should bring phosphorus.
Chicken manure, doesn't chicken manure have the highest phosphorus content? If you have availability to chicken, and I was reading the manures, Sammy, that one article I read you, the manures was one of the things that they used to dilute the cobalt toxicity. So, and we can talk about that a little bit later, but so if you have access to chicken manures, that will typically be high in phosphorus. I would think that would be the best manure for your particular situation. If you have other manures will be fine, but chicken manure is going to be the highest in phosphorus to get those plants the energy that they need. And that may be like you're saying, you put some manure down and the plants grow. And then the next time around, the plants aren't growing. The phosphorus has been used up, or it's become locked up, because phosphorus does become locked up very easily over time. So, and that's why your subsequent plantings are running out of energy.
Yes. Now, I will say Malic 3 is not the best extraction for phosphorus. We use a different extraction method typically on phosphorus. So it could be, if we change the extraction method, you could find more phosphorus there, but I still think it's going to be really overshadowed. Sammy, in our portfolio coming from Tanio Biologics, we use a phosphorus solubilizing bacteria. Whether you can find access to that there, that could help unlock phosphorus by spraying a bacteria specifically designed to do that, if it turns out to be there and just not available.
My question to you, Joshua, will be, because this phosphorus is there, maybe if we are assuming that, I don't know what you're assuming or what we are maybe trying to say, but if we are saying that the phosphorus is there, don't you think that it is the lowering of the manganese? That is what I want to understand, really.
Well, the iron and manganese have a 1-to-1 ratio. If you look at grams 6 balancing. So just like Corey said, the manganese is overshadowing the iron. So I think by applying iron humate, you could change that balance some. You couldn't change it all in 1 year, but the high manganese is definitely going to lock out your phosphorus. Your high zinc, zinc is super high. Well, I mean, I guess not over well, looking at phosphorus, zinc is very high. It should be a 10-to-1 ratio, phosphorus zinc, and you are more zinc than phosphorus. So you don't have phosphorus. Look at photosynthesis again. You need nitrogen, which we're working on. Magnesium. If it's not bad ratio with calcium. So you should have magnesium. But then you need iron, which you're not going to have because you have too much manganese. And you need phosphorus because you have too much manganese. Again, it'll be overshadowing both of those. So you're struggling with photosynthesis early, and then you're struggling with energy. Which in root growth is all about phosphorus. We mentioned boron as being a part of calcium availability. So therefore it's going to have a lot to do with root development and early season development, as well. And yeah, so I think you've got to get your pH up a bit. So adding calcium, magnesium is going to make sense. But in that, you're going to need, more importantly, if you didn't want to do any of that, then it's going to be phosphorus, iron, and boron, and sulfur. But I think we have to get the calcium up. I don't feel like you have any available calcium. When you talk about thin leaves early, that's calcium. So through all this, we don't have phosphorus, but because of all that, we're not getting calcium. Man, I just talked myself in a circle, guys. I'm sorry, but Corey, jump in there.
Yeah, I mean, getting that pH up into the, that 6.5 range, Sammy, by some lime, some calcium with as little magnesium in it as possible, because your soil is really, really good in magnesium, so you don't really need more magnesium, and you only need a little bit of calcium to get that pH up. That will help. The higher that pH gets, it will help reduce the amount of manganese that's going to be available, but it also reduces iron. But we're not talking about even going outside of the range where, so the problem, I guess, with the manganese iron ratio there is still going to exist. You may be looking at a situation of foliar applications of iron,
yes,
to be able to make sure that those plants can get iron. I'm not sure long term. I mean,
I was
it's just the manganese number is so high.
I mean, your good compost has a lot of calcium in it and low magnesium. So if you could get wood chips, you know, that's available. That could be a source of calcium over the time, you know, breaking down or composting it first and then putting it in, adding sulfur to the compost and then putting it out. You know, try to mend the compost and put the compost out. Could be a way to go. I know that's a long-term solution and not something we can do tomorrow, but.
I want to go back to what Sammy's question was earlier. This might be something that Sammy doesn't quite understand. There are different, like if I had this soil over here, there's another soil, different type of soil test that I would do, that I would send it into this lab that we have here in the United States, and it would check the total. And like Joshua was saying, the extract that's used, the Melic-3 extract that's used here for various things, it's certainly not going to be picking up all the potential phosphorus that's in the soil. And there's a different soil test that can be done to find out, is there a lot more phosphorus in this soil than what this test is reading? Or is the soil just extremely low naturally in phosphorus? That's the question we don't know right now. We don't know if this soil is naturally really, really low in phosphorus, or if there is actually a bunch there, it's just extremely locked up and can't be picked up by this particular test. If it's actually there and just bound up, then over time with creation of biology and stuff like that, this number can start coming up and becoming available to the plant. But we just don't know if, but either way, in the short term, as Joshua was pointing out, you're going to need some phosphorus given to these plants to be able to get something going, because they're just not going to move with a phosphorus level like this. I think your phosphorus is your biggest limiting factor in this. Manganese is the excess factor that's causing potentially a multitude of problems. But
yeah,
phosphorus is definitely killing your energy.
Again, by adding phosphorus, adding sulfur, both we're lowering pH. And we've already, I mean, we're not super low on pH, but again, it's an odd duck where what we really need limiting factor is going to lower the pH. And so therefore, if you scroll down to your base saturation, Corey, I want to just point out something real quick and why I think we need calcium. A little further down.
Right here.
Yeah. So because you got 20% hydrogen, that's where your low pH is coming from. Because we don't have sulfur, we don't have phosphorus. So where's the low pH? It's coming from hydrogen. And hydrogen is basically a high hydrogen is basically you've been farming that soil and it's been exchanging, and then you get a lot of free ranging hydrogens locked up, and it really should be releasing and creating water or releasing by tying up to a calcium ion. So if you look at a base saturation of 53% on calcium, we don't have any calcium availability for cell structure. Again, magnesium's perfect. Potassium's, it says high on the top, but I mean,
I think, yeah, because I think it could come up a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, potassium's good, but it could come up a bit if you're growing fruiting crops for sure.
But looking for that 1-to-1 ratio between potassium and magnesium.
Yes, but you wouldn't see that on the base saturation percentage.
Right. None of the, I'm just talking about the parts per million.
Yeah. So again, adding calcium would displace the hydrogen. It actually would create oxygen within the soil. Your Cal-Mag ratio is very tight. 3.3 would be good if you were in sand, but being that you have 15 CEC says you got a clay, this really needs to be 8-to-1. So really there's a lot of room for calcium. And that any addition of calcium at this point is going to help your overall balance. It could come from, and since we do really want pH, I do think lime is either high cal lime I don't think I'd use lime with high magnesium, but high cal lime only has like 2 or 3% magnesium. So high cal lime, and then that would free up this hydrogen, which would raise the pH. Then you would have room to add sulfur and phosphorus.
What about sulfur? I mean, I guess sulfur, obviously sulfur in the sulfate form is going to move very, very fast through the soil. So does in the sulfate form, is it not going to, does the soil test pick up when it's testing for sulfur? Is it picking up, if you have a lot of sulfate products that you've added into your soil, is it going to read that sulfate as sulfur on the soil test, or is it not going to pick that sulfate up?
I think it picks up a percentage of it, but it does not pick up all of it. For
Because
sure.
the sulfate form is what's a plant available.
That's right. That's right.
And just so you know, Sammy, people might be confused on that. Sulfate does not lower the pH itself. It's sulfur when it's converted to sulfuric acid. That sulfuric acid is what is lowering the pH. The sulfate, like if you add potassium sulfate, magnesium sulfate, these things don't lower the pH,
Right.
because the sulfate itself isn't going
Already
to
been converted.
Right. It's already past that sulfuric acid point, or I'm not even sure. Yeah. Sulfate is not going to get converted into sulfuric acid. Elemental sulfur gets converted into sulfuric acid. So just, people might get confused in that and think that something that is in a sulfate form would lower the pH, but sulfate is not going to lower your pH, and it's going to give you plant available sulfur that your plants desperately need in this particular case.
And so from what you have been saying, Corey and Joshua, look at the recommendations,
Right.
how to do the soil correction after the analysis. There we have the solution input and the rates in kg per hectare and kg per acre. I want you to speak about the correction. I know you have spoken about it with Joshua. That is what we have been doing, but what will you say about what they recommended?
Well, the calcitic lime, that's exactly what I was talking about. And
Yes.
1,400 kilograms per hectare. What is that like?
Well, you got per acre over here, 565. So divide that by 2. We're looking at basically 330, somewhere around 350 to 400 pounds of calcium.
Now,
Well, no, that's lime.
double
That's
it?
lime per acre. So
Wouldn't it double it? Wouldn't it be a kilogram per acre? So that would be times 2.2.
oh yeah, whoops, I'm sorry, my bad, not divide it, multiply it.
So 1,000 pounds basically, or 1,200 pounds per acre.
Right, is what they're saying. What percentage of that is actual calcium?
Yeah, 35 to 40% calcium, 1% magnesium.
Yeah, they're obviously trying to, that's important to recognize that less than 1% magnesium. They're recommending to find a lime that is very low in magnesium, not high in magnesium. So a dolomite could be very high in magnesium, and that's not what you particularly want in this situation. So you got to be mindful of that to find a lime that is low and as low as possible in magnesium.
And then on the phosphorus recommendation, no, I don't think I would use triple superphosphate. I would tend to try to use more chicken manure or use soft rock phosphate.
What is it? Within any of those, that triple superphosphate, as Graham says, I think 73% of that phosphate will be locked up and bound up within 6 months and not available to the plant.
And then it's going to cause major problems to biology. And it's gonna decrease the need for that phosphorus solubilizing bacteria that we naturally need, because you'll be giving it all the phosphate it needs all the time. And we won't get the biology building in the right manner. I'm not saying that you couldn't use it as an amendment. I mean, on the conventional side, things here, we certainly use that. But I don't see in my on my SAP test, the only place I can find where we have available phosphorus in the SAP test is on our organic blocks using manure and biology. Everybody that's using this superphosphate, they're just dumping it in and it's tying up the calcium. So I don't agree with that recommendation. I think that'll lead to some more problems. I think we need to look for a different source.
This is what we kind of talked about this in our original, the very first day we talked about this, Sammy. I mentioned that soil test companies often also sell fertilizers, and one of the things they will do is recommend the selling of various fertilizers off of their soil tests, and that's how they make actually most of their money, is the selling of their fertilizers. But as Joshua just explained to you, yeah, the soil needs phosphorus, but how do we go about that? What is the best route to do that? Well, if you're a fertilizer company, the best route is to sell you triple superphosphate. If you're really trying to do something with your soil, triple superphosphate is not your best avenue to do this. But it's just typical of a fertilizer company to be like, here, this is what you need, triple superphosphate.
Hey guys, I hate to do this, but I'm gonna have to sign off. So I hope you guys will be able to finish here, and I appreciate you guys. Blessings. I'll be praying for you, man.
All right,
Thank you
thanks.
so much for joining.
Yes, thanks. Good luck. Bye. See y'all next week.
Okay, see you. So Corey,
Yeah, I
that is,
think-
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so the first recommendation on the line, Sammy, is probably pretty good. We could talk about the amount later. What, as far as, is the amount correct, good or not? The triple superphosphate, I would, like he said I would stay away from that and look for particularly chicken manure if you can get it. If not, other types of manure will work, because that's going to get some phosphorus, plant available phosphorus. You may have to apply it on a fairly often basis for a while. And then I would say the third thing that I see on your soil test is try to, we would want to work on probably an iron foliar spray. I would call that an option. It's definitely going to help if you could get it. And I would even add, like he said, actually the potassium, when you add manures, you're going to get more potassium in there for the manures. So that's going to take care of the potassium issue too, because the potassium can definitely come up to be closer in ratio to the magnesium. So you don't have to, so that will fix the potassium a little bit. So go back to that soil test once again, Sammy, but that's looking, I think that's the major, if you bring that up, Lord, I just want to look at that. So yeah, the iron, all your other minerals you could definitely use some boron in there. They're not telling you to add it. But I would personally want to bring that boron up closer to the 2 level. It is an extremely important mineral for accessing calcium. I'm sure if we had gotten to it, Joshua would have recommended some boron in this soil. Other than that, I mean, it's really good that you don't have to hunt down all these minor nutrients. Just to give you an example, my soil test, almost all soils are pretty good in iron, but my soil test, the parts per million of manganese was 1. 1 part per million was my manganese level. Yours is 505. Mine was exceptionally low. Yours is exceptionally high. Boron, we were about the same. Copper, mine was very low in the 1 to 2 range, and zinc was also in the 1 to 2 range for mine. You have really good levels of that particular stuff. Maybe a bit high on the copper and zinc, but it's not extreme. So it's good that you have that stuff. It looks to me like there's a lot of stuff in this soil that you're never going to have to worry about replacing. there's probably lots of it stored up in the bedrock of the soil that can be released over time. And we're just looking at trying to fix the phosphorus issue and getting plant available iron and calcium to those plants. Those are the big three that we're looking at. Iron to take care of iron, phosphorus, and iron, phosphorus, iron and phosphorus. Of course, calcium is always a big one. Sulfur.
You see, molybdenum is also high. I think we
Yes.
have talked about manganese for long. How
Yes.
about the
Your molybdenum
molybdenum?
levels, even though that shows hot, like it shows that it should be around that 1 range, you can even 2. So this is definitely high. It's actually excessively high, but and that's basically 4 parts per million of molybdenum. You're not gonna, I personally don't think you're gonna have any problems there, because molybdenum is only excessively available in a really high pH environment. You're in a low pH environment. That means this molybdenum, even though there's lots of it, it's not going to be like toxically available to your plants. If you had extremely high pH, then you might have a potential issue. But if you keep your pHs in the 6s, under 7, I don't think you're going to have a problem with the molybdenum there. The biggest issue that you're going to definitely want to do some study on, is this cobalt issue. And I'll ask you, because I want to ask you a question as far as your area, because what I had read is that it's very common in Central Africa. In the particular reading that I read, it mentions Zambia and the Congo, but I'm sure it's in other parts of Central Africa where mining has taken place, particularly for minerals and stuff like that, and they get cobalt contamination from that mining. And it might be a fairly common thing, because cobalt levels at that high should not be happening unless it seems like there's some type of mining contamination. As far as the history of the land in your guys' area, are you aware of any potential mining that has ever been done that could have caused a cobalt contamination?
No.
Not aware of that. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's just cobalt at that high could definitely cause some problems for the toxicity problems, not only for the plant, but actually eating the plants, if the plants are absorbing that much cobalt, particularly root crops, from what I understand. Basically, what I'm saying with the cobalt is I would just go through the internet and do some search on cobalt toxicity in plants in the soil, and read as much as you can about it, because there is, I'm not an expert enough to know, because I have like 1 or 2 parts per million of cobalt in my soil, not 102. And so you're going to want to do some research just to make sure that this soil, by the adding of manures and stuff like that, I know that was one of the things that was in the study that helps dilute that. So you're going to want to find various ways to be able to grow your plants, so your plants are not getting toxic levels of cobalt and then transferring that toxic level of cobalt to your human body. So, because now we're talking about a situation where we may be actually hurting human health. But I'm not saying that's definitely what's going on here. I'm just saying you need to research that to find out, because cobalt is definitely a heavy metal that could be toxic in too high of a levels, and is definitely going to have problems with healing foods and health message and stuff like that, if plants are indeed getting too much cobalt in them. So just do some personal research, particularly on that, to make sure you're not going to get a toxic amounts of cobalt in you from this particular soil.
I want to introduce something. Maybe as we come to an end, we are having like 10 minutes. I'd like you to see, I'd like us to see those who are logged in and those watching online. I don't know, our brethren who are here, and you, Corey, if you can comment on this. I'll just share my screen. I was discussing my soil analysis with the brother who was helping me put up the garden, and he looked at the he listened to my soil analysis, and this is kind of what he was saying. I think we can see the screen. Making our own fertilizer manure to balance the nutrients, and he was recommending this even without a soil analysis. Just if you can't afford the soil analysis, which is also important, but you can try to balance your soil by using this method. He told me that this is what he did, and his soil was bad, but it became so good, the one that he just gave me to use in my garden.
Okay.
And so look at this, making our own fertilizer manure to balance the nutrients. He was saying that what he did is that when you are making this fertilizer, it should be under a shade, and it should not be under a blue gum tree, but it should be, if it can be under a fruit tree or any other tree, it should be under a shade, but not under blue gum. This is what you do. The first layer on the ground, when you're making this manure or fertilizer that will go to balance the nutrients, the first layer is the coarse matter. This coarse matter is made up of dry sticks. And so you put it at the first layer, the ground. And then the second layer, you will put the dry matter, that is maize stalks, things like that. And then we have the third layer, which is the green matter. In this green matter, he was suggesting that we have the comfrey. That is what he used. And then Tithonia, as we know it in Africa, you know, there as the yellow sunflower.
Yes, we call it Mexican sunflower here. Very high in nitrogen.
Yes.
Yes, very, very fast growing. You can chop it and drop it, and it becomes a good fertilizer.
And then again, the smell itself of the fertilizer and the manure will be a pest repellent on its own.
Okay.
Yeah. Then that is another thing that you include in the green matter, which is the third layer, is lantana. And what was another thing? Yeah, the eggshells. Then the fourth layer, as you are going up, you will have the organic, that is
compost,
organic,
manures, things that have
organic
already broken down.
Yes, that is the animal manure. It will help so much. And then you have the fifth layer, which is the ash. You understand the ash?
Ash is wood ash from burning.
Yes,
That's
that
going
is
to
it.
add.
It's high in potassium.
Yep, high in potassium, calcium. It also, I mean, it will have a pH raising effect, just as the eggshells. So you definitely want to make sure you're careful with the wood ash and the eggshells, as far as you don't want to run too much of it could skyrocket your pH between the two.
Yes,
but
because
a right amount could potentially help really well.
Yeah, he was talking about the ash correcting the acidity in the soil by increasing the alkalinity of the soil.
Yep.
Yes, and then we have the top, the sixth layer, which is at the top. That is, you just take a topsoil and put on top of it. Then you will be pouring water on it, and then the ash will go through all those things that you have assembled together, And at the end, when it rots, you will have a good fertilizer that
I see.
will actually be able to balance the nutrient, and at the same time, it is high in pH if your pH is low. This is what I was getting from him today when we were looking at.
I see. So you would add that as an amendment later, once it's broken down, and you've basically got a nice black soil left over after X amount of time, you would add that in. This is actually, you could take this right here and add this whole idea into the Johnson-Su bioreactor. It's the same thing. Making a bioreactor, I mean, you can add food scraps. It's the same thing. You're creating both an inoculant and a fertilizer by doing this, and it's basically the same thing that you're looking at. So it's a very good idea to be able to use something like that. There are obviously.
Something that I have just forgotten on that list is he was talking about also what we looked at last time when I was sharing with you, but he was also talking about if we can collect as much banana peels as we can, it is exceptionally high in potassium, and it can really balance that high manganese.
Yeah, I'm not sure as far as the potassium versus manganese issue, but I'm sure all of this organic matter will definitely help with neutralizing the manganese issue. It's potentially, that's just something you're going to have to play with over time and experiment to see how well you can control the issues. What you're really looking at, what you're going to know if what you're going to be looking for in this particular situation with the high manganese issue is, okay, are the leaves having chlorosis yellow problems? Am I seeing a lot of yellowing problems? If I am, that would tell you in this particular context that manganese is still locking up iron and probably various other things, but especially iron. So, but if your plants are greening up well, they may very well be getting the iron that they need because of the biology and because of everything. So you're watching for that. And typically most people would consider yellow leaves and iron problems as a high pH issue. You don't have a high pH issue. You have a high manganese issue, which can lock out iron just the same as a high pH. So that's why you're just keeping an eye on that, because you have magnesium with all of this manure. You're going to have nitrogen. So these various things that make the plant green are all there. So it would tell me, other than basically you're looking at phosphorus and but if you're using manures, you should be able to have phosphorus. The biggest thing that you're looking for, if you're still getting yellow leaves, is plants are struggling to get iron. So keep an eye on that particular factor. And over time, I would say one thing. That's something that, yearly test or every couple of years of soil testing. If you are using a lot of manures, particular chicken manures, you got to make sure you keep an eye to make sure that phosphorus level doesn't suddenly get too high on you. That's because too high a phosphorus is then going to start causing different problems. So just keep an eye on that over soil testing. I'm sure you're probably good. And right now, too high a phosphorus is the least of your problems.
Thank you so much. I see Zadok carrying up his hand. Brother Zadok, welcome.
Yes, I have a question. We're talking about chicken manure, and I tried to buy it because if we are going to be practical, we must look at the cost that are involved. Chicken manure, I realize it's extremely expensive.
Okay.
I was trying to buy some a few weeks ago, and Why is there a problem? Because I was thinking now I just need to buy hens and keep hens because yeah, I thought about it and I shared with my family that it's going to be cheap to keep hens
Yep.
and then get the manure than going to buy this all through. And what I bought could not even cover a large piece of land.
Right.
So I thought about that and I said, what's the sin in buying the hens and then keeping them? Now you just talked about eggshells, and I'm wondering where I'm going to get all those. And is it practical? I had initially, I mean, for a long time, I had the whole concept that has been around is, hey, when you're a farmer, you don't even need to keep these animals. So my parents happened to have some cows that of help in terms of manure. So I was able to get manure cow manure for planting some bananas, and I was thinking, hey, now they've come in handy.
Right.
So where is the balance here so that we can be able? And I know when we'll be talking about pesticides, I've tried milk as a good one for fungal infections and so on, and mildew.
Powdery mildew.
Yeah, just pouring milk on spraying milk really works wonders and miracles. So what would you say about having these animals for the purpose of your soil biology?
Yes, before just Corey speaks, Brother Zadok, as the brother was advising me this, he said that he couldn't get eggshells. And so what he did, he just used lime. I haven't really looked into it so much. What else can be used instead of the eggshell? Maybe if somebody else has an answer he can give, but he said that he couldn't find the eggshells because he doesn't have hens. And so he just went about using the lime. And as you can bear witness, you saw the vegetables. They were not bad off, they were good. And so I haven't even checked the prices of lime, so I don't know how expensive, but as you say, we should be practical about the issue. Maybe correct, yes?
I bought lime. I have lime. Lime, basically what they use here for construction is what you'll be sent to buy. It's actually what's used. I used it in planting the fruits when we are doing the Ellen White method. And it should be around 600 to 700 Kenya shillings for the 50 kg bag. But I'm looking for something that, because that one we have to go to perhaps the hardware or some sort of place to get them. But I'm looking for a sustainable means. That's what I'm a sustainable source. Because a time might come when I might not be able to buy lime from the school. Yeah, sure.
Right. And so obviously you're from basically the testimony you just mentioned. It sounds like you're starting to, it's like, you can start to see that God had some potential purposes and uses in mind for these animals in the case of if this world went astray, and it did, and that they did, everybody looks at animals, hey, the animals are meant to just simply be food. They're meant to be food for us. And obviously we know that God did not intend the animals to be food for us, but they obviously could potentially have a good purpose in our agricultural programs. I know that in like larger and fairly large acreages or plots, what people are learning to do right now in the US is they do a lot of rotational grazing. They take these animals into an area and they have that particular area of the field penned off so they can only get at so much of it. They take them, they graze the area for a short amount of time, sometimes a day or less than a week. And then they move, and then of course their manure and everything is being dropped in spot. And then they move them to another area and they just keep rotating these animals, and the soil gets better and better and better. And throughout the middle of the United States, we have the big agricultural lands, and that's where all the bison used to be. The everything grew naturally and wild there, and the bison were constantly migrating through there. And of course, they were leaving behind their manure and stuff, but grazing the plants down so far, and then the plants get a chance to regrow. When a plant gets grazed down, it's got a lot of excess root in the ground. A lot of that root dies off and becomes organic matter and turns that soil black and grows that soil. And then the plant regrows very fast and regrows the roots. And there's this cycle of building the soil. And that's how the Midwest, you can actually grow lots of topsoil. Probably the fastest way to grow topsoil is through migrational grazing, where a lot of places they will put their animals out on a pasture and they just leave them out there constantly. And the grasses and stuff, they never grow. So the ground never builds and gets any better. But when you allow that ground to have time to regrow, that soil is constantly being replenished and rebuilt and revitalized, rejuvenated through rotational grazing. So that's one of the aspects. And like you said, being able to get the manures and such, and you can add that stuff into a compost pile, like a bioreactor, to help aid in the biology and all of that stuff. So yeah, obviously God had an intended purpose there of potential for the animals in our context, even though we don't eat them. So spot on.
In fact, I remember what you're saying. Many people do not know where the huge chunk of the vegetable that supplies Nairobi in terms of the local vegetable, that's the something like the nightshade, what they call managu here, comes from. But basically, it comes from where we stay, that's Transmara. And why? It's because that vegetable does not do well on organic fertilizers. And so it's very difficult for people to be able to just plant them anywhere on large scale. And what they do is the community, which is here, because they actually have a lot of animals, and they sort of do what you're saying, where they put them on an area and they graze. People hire areas which have been grazed, and they just plant the crops there. Very you only need clearing of the land, and the harvest is so huge. They simply hire a place where the cows, I mean all the cattle have been grazed for a period of time, and then they move to another place, and so on, and it really does well. It really does well. So I'm thinking that what you're talking about is really true, because I also watched through a Back to Eden, and there is a way in which they basically keep hens, because hens also help in decomposition and sort of things. And so they keep hens in different shades and move them to another place, and the soil in the previous section just becomes really good for you, especially the vegetables. They say especially most of the vegetables will really do well. And finally, I just wanted to mention, I'm sorry for talking a lot, but I also wanted to mention another thing that I've found to be working, especially for those who are coming close to places where they have sugar factories, is actually the dampers, which is actually that bagasse, the bagasse from the sugar is decomposed. I don't know how they decompose it, but if you're having things like sulfur problems and so on, and you just get that bagasse which is decomposed, and you apply it on your farm, the produce is really going to increase. Now, another thing that I've found to work, and people don't know about it, you might not know about it, Brother Corey, but it's looked at the worst thing in Kenya, marine life, and it's called water hyacinth. Water hyacinth is something that has really destroyed in terms of fishing in Kenya and so on. And
interior lakes, like you're talking about freshwater lakes?
Yes, in freshwater lakes.
Yeah.
And yet that thing actually from areas around my wife's home, I was talking to Brother Charles. For those who know Brother Charles, those who actually took it and decomposed it and then used it in the farm are
Yes.
experiencing a very huge shift in the production. I mean, the production is much better, and basically take it, shred it, and then they decompose it.
Yep.
I mean, I think using the methods that you are talking about,
Yep.
and the corn production, because that's what they go there mainly, vegetable production is really huge. So areas that we can think about
Yeah.
in terms.
Yeah. If you can find a way to harvest that in large enough quantities and stuff like that, that's great. Kelp, sea kelp. Obviously, I think you guys are a little too far from the ocean, but sea kelp is basically from the ocean, and that's very good stuff too. But yeah, in your particular area, if you have access to being able to get any type of vegetation out of a pond or a lake or anything like that, that vegetation is going to be good vegetation for composting and inoculating and mineralizing the soil. Adding small amounts of sea ocean water. You don't want to go too crazy with it with the sodium, but I know in Sammy's soil test, he's got there's plenty of room for more sodium to be added in. So seawater has a lot. It doesn't have a lot of mineral. It has a lot of quantity. I'm sorry, let me make sure I phrase this correctly. All of the minerals that exist basically are in the seawater. They're just in very, very minute trace amounts. But that is definitely a something good to be adding to the soil. Just keeping an eye on the soil test to make sure you don't get your sodium levels out of whack.
Okay.
But that will help biology and your plants in these particular situations. And sodium also has an effect on raising pH to a degree too. So just be mindful of that. You're not off by much. Your pH that's an easy, your pH situation at 5.8, that's so easy to fix. That'll be easy to fix. Getting phosphorus in there will be easy to fix. It's just studying to understand what to do with the cobalt situation. That needs to be studied and understand what you can do there, and watching to make sure that that manganese is not locking up the iron. And then you'll start getting going. And like you said, Sammy, you're just probably going to have to, whether you guys get animals to constantly be getting you new supplies of manure and stuff, every crop rotation, you're going to probably want to get new manure put in there to get that phosphorus levels up for your plants and everything. Once those soil tests get up there and you've got a system working and the biology is working, you may find that there is native phosphorus in the soil, and it will come up, it will start to be extracted by the biology, and your soil test will start having a consistent supply of phosphorus, and you won't have this problem of, oh, this crop worked good, now the next crop's gone bad again. But either way, it's still going to take time. It's just going to take time. But at least now with your soil test, we have a good idea of where the limiting factors are. And that's what you're looking for in a soil test. You're looking for, what are the limiting factors here? What are the problems, the key problems that are my particular context? And I think yours are very easy to say. Overall, it's like, wow, like he said, man, I'd like to have some of this. I'd like to have some of this soil to blend in with my sandy soil because the minerals are so high.
Thank you so much, Brother Corey, and thank you, Zadok, for that information. I think there is a point that you raised that we have to consider if we will be able to rear these animals so that they may supply where there is deficiency. Otherwise, we continue learning and we continue looking into these things. Until next Sunday, I want us to stop there. And we want just to close up with a word of prayer. And Zadok, will you close up with a word of prayer?
Yeah, sure, let's go. Holy Father in heaven, we're so thankful where we can be able to gather over this platform to learn how best, Lord, we can be able to put to practice the messages that you've been giving us, Lord, for 170 years. In fact, Lord, for 6,000 years you've been sending to humanity. We are so thankful, dear Lord, for those who have been able to lead us through. We pray that you may fill them, Lord, with knowledge. And Lord, you may also give us, Lord, the spirit to practice that which you are learning. May you help every one of us, Lord, as we pray in our hearts wherever we are, to get a better acquaintance, Lord, with how we can work the soil and bring food out of the soil, food, Lord, that can be able to help, Lord, to fill, Lord, the bodily needs with all the nutrients that are required, the vitamins and the food groups, Lord, that are needed for us to be healthy. Your blessings be upon us wherever we are, now and forevermore. We prayed in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen.
Before going, Sammy, one of the things I will add that you might be able to do in the future, as far as the cobalt issue, that same company that you crop nuts, they probably do what's called tissue testing, plant tissue testing. And what you could do sometime in the future when you've grown some crops, especially crops that are going to be leafy greens type stuff that you would eat, but you could probably do that with even fruits and vegetables, would be to send in a tissue leaf sample into that and get that tested, and particularly looking to see, is this plant getting toxic amounts of cobalt in it? And if the test comes back and shows no, it's not getting, we're good, then you at least know that the cobalt's not getting from the ground to the plant to getting into you at a toxic level. So that's something that you can look into in the future, on top of various things, to make sure that you don't end up with a cobalt toxicity situation, because obviously something like that, we can do everything right in the health system, and if we get a toxic amount of anything, it can just basically undo all the good that we're doing. And that's just, so really study into that cobalt issue, because that's my biggest concern, and I don't have enough expertise to know whether or not this is definitely a problem or it's potentially a problem.
Okay, thank you so much. And until next Sunday, God willing, God be with you all.